What happens when the fear of being called racist causes entire governments to look away from child abuse, violence, and the breakdown of society? It's exactly what happened in the United Kingdom. We see it developing in Minneapolis and Dearborn, and it begs the question, will that happen here in Alabama? Well, buckle up as we expose the stark realities behind some of 1819 News' headlines recently in today's podcast. We have an incredible culture here in the state of Alabama, but our politics and public policy don't reflect the people of Alabama. Media drives culture. Culture is what drives politics and public policy. Welcome, everyone, to 1819 News, the podcast. I'm Bryan Dawson, CEO of 1819 News and host of this here podcast, where we are in pursuit of a free and flourishing Alabama every single week. Last week, we went pretty hard in the paint on ways that groups that we would consider our political enemies are subverting not only to the political process, but specifically in the state of Alabama, how they are buying and talking and, buying their way into and strategically moving their way into Republican influence. They want influence in the Republican Party in our state because our state is a Republican supermajority. And so I took you through how the teachers union did that, and then I showed you how there are Muslims who are trying to do that in our state right now. And I'm ringing the bell, trying to warn everybody, guys, don't Dearborn my Alabama, okay? This is how it happens. These are the beginning stages, and I bet the beginning stages probably go back another 15 years that we didn't see. And by the time we're beginning to see this fruit, it's probably pretty far along in the process, and we need to realize it, and it's dangerous. And so this is also coming on the heels of United States Senator Tommy Tuberville going up on the United States Senate floor with massive signs saying ban Sharia law. Senator Tuberville is someone who gets it at a deep level. He understands the threat that this is, and he has gone to war against the Mohammedans, as my guest would call them, and they are a violent people. They desire to, when they have their perfect utopia, when they take over, it won't be well for us, put it that way. And so I'm bringing on a new friend of mine who I've gotten to know a couple weeks ago, Father Calvin Robinson, and he and I hit it off. He spoke at an event at the University of Alabama at Huntsville for Turning Point USA, and I've been a big fan long before that, so I traveled up to Huntsville to hear him speak. And Father Calvin Robinson has been an absolute, just an inspiration for me as someone who's just gone to war against civilizational enemies, no matter the cost. It's cost him his job, and it's pretty much he's not living in England anymore. And we're going to get into that story, but it's cost him a lot, and he's continued to press forward no matter the cost, and those are the people that I admire most, and so I'm really honored to bring you guys Father Calvin Robinson. So, Father, thank you so much for coming on and taking the time to join us.
It's an absolute pleasure. Thank you for coming up to Huntsville for that speech, by the way. It was good to meet you and good to smoke cigars with you, and I think that's how we put the world to rights, isn't it, over a good cigar.
That's right. Tobacco is there. Everybody gets freaked out about cigars and pipes, and it's like, look, go back in literature and history and find me, whether it's C.S. Lewis and J.R. Tolkien, whether it's Charles Spurgeon, find me someone that was a prolific writer who was doing things that changed things that didn't have a pipe or a cigar. I'm just saying.
Right. Only women get upset about pipes and cigars. I'm sorry.
There you go.
I do have it's a real bugbear of mine, actually, when you see grown men sucking on those bits of plastic. It's so infantilized, isn't it? It's like a pacifier. Like, throw that bit of trash away, throw the battery away, and get yourself a bit of tobacco.
That's right. Amen. Amen. So I want to basically just allow you a moment to tell your story, how you ended up in America rather than England. You obviously have a thick accent that would say, hey, as we say down in Alabama, you ain't from around here, is you? And so
not from these parts.
Yeah. So there's so much I would love for you to touch on, because what I want to wake everyone up to, you watched happen to your homeland, which is the United Kingdom, Britain. You watched it happen, and it's been completely overran by Muslims. Talk about your background there and kind of how you saw all of this beginning to form and come together over the years.
Well, where to begin? I suppose let's start with now rather than in the history. We currently have 25 Mohammedans in our Houses of Parliament, and that's a record high. Bear in mind, 100 years ago, you had to be a member of the Church of England to stand for Parliament in England, right, to run for office. It was expected that you'd be a member of the state church. You'd have the state faith, which is Christianity. We did away with that in the beginnings of diversity, inclusion, and equity. Before woke was even a word, it was actually as an attempt to be more inclusive towards Catholics. And so rather than saying, well, you can be Anglican or Catholic and run for office, what they did is they got rid of the Test Act. They repealed the Test Act so anyone could run for office. Bear in mind, in my country, I think we had one Jewish prime minister at once, Disraeli, who converted to Anglicanism in order to stand as a parliamentarian and then become prime minister. So people had to conform at one stage. We did away with conformity because conformity is bad, right? Diversity is our strength somehow. Diluting our culture, our faith, our ethnicity, diluting everything we hold dear is somehow making us stronger. Well, it's making someone stronger and it's not us. So we have 25 members of parliament now because this law was repealed. And 15 of them stood on the principle of vote for Gaza or vote for Islam. So not vote for a part of Britain, not vote for a British value or a Christian value, not vote for our heritage, our history, vote for a foreign land or a foreign faith. And that's how they got elected. But how did this happen? How did we get to a point where Mohammedans who are believing a system, and I won't call it a faith because it's not a religion, it's an ideology, it's a political ideology of dominance, of conquering, believe in something that is contradictory to our own way of life. How did they get elected into office in our own country? How are they our representatives? How are they governing us now? Well, because we tried to feed the crocodile, because we tried to appease them, because we tried to include them. We tried to be diverse for them. And in what way? Well, our politicians have kind of fluffed around the topic and or chased after their votes. And this is a problem because in most demographics, there is no such thing as a block vote, in my country at least. Like there's no single mother's vote, there's no black vote, there's no white vote, there's no Christian vote. There is a Mohammedan vote. They do vote as a block. They are the only demographic that in the general majority votes as a block because they vote however their imam tells them. That's well, all the men vote how their imam tells them, and all the men vote for their multiple wives. And they'll drop off all the ballot papers at the mosque, and they'll be delivered in one block vote, quite literally, to the polling station. This should be illegal for many reasons, but they've been voting for themselves. And so the left is that we have the Labour Party in Britain, very similar to the Democrat Party out here, that would support Islam in anything. And they'll pander to them, encourage them, and promote the idea of Islamophobia, which is basically a blasphemy law for Mohammedans, and promoting all these ridiculous ideas in order to gain their favor, to gain their vote, which worked for a while. So the Mohammedans were voting for the left-wing parties because A, they were pandering to them, and B, they were giving them the benefits and the welfare, which, of course, once you're kind of, if you feel entitled to that stuff and you're kind of stuck in the system, you kind of vote for your master in that way. And so they did that for a while until they got enough of a critical mass to stand themselves. And now that's what they're doing. They're running themselves. And so they don't need Labour anymore. And what's been interesting, Brian, about that is that now the very politicians who were pandering to the Mohammedans are under attack from the Mohammedans, and they don't know what they've done. They don't understand it. We've been here for you this whole time. Yes, but you're a woman and they hate women. Or, you're a white woman, they hate white women. And they're being verbally abused. And some of them are frightened for their lives. They've closed their political offices. They've stopped canvassing on the streets. And essentially they're afraid, but they will never address it publicly because they don't want to be seen as racist or far right, right? And so they'll say things like, men are a threat to our democracy. No. This is not a male issue. We've obviously had men in our country since its inception. This has never been a problem before. Our female politicians have not been abused before. What's changed? What in the demographics of the men has changed? Which type of men are we talking about here? They use these euphemisms because they cannot speak the truth, because they're afraid of, if they address the truth, they become a part of the problem, because they see the problem as people who raise the alarms rather than the people who are doing the abuse themselves. And so we've got into this point in my country where Mohammedans are now in our houses of power. They are essentially gaining in number. And we know that, to take over any institution, a critical mass is what, 3.5%? They are 6.5% of the demographics of the country now. So they have their critical mass. What happens next? Who knows? It's a danger. But before I wrap up on this little segment, is that we know that already there are 85 Sharia courts in the United Kingdom, right? And Sharia, Islamic law is toxic. It's dangerous, but also it runs parallel to the law of the land. And so we have whole communities where people they're not under the jurisdiction of the local police and the local judges. They have their own system, their own legal system, where it's something from divorce to honor killings. They take care of it within their own house. And that is clearly undemocratic. Not that I hold democracy up on any kind of pedestal, but it's just a mess of a system. And so we look around Europe and we see actually, there are more Sharia courts in Britain than there are in the rest of Europe combined. And so we look globally and we say, the people that are running these courts, the people that are in our country, are the people that Qatar has banned, that Saudi Arabia has banned, because they see them as too extreme. Right? We've got the Islamist extremists that are the Mohammedans that are too extreme for the Mohammedan countries. They're banned from Mohammedan countries. So they come to us and we welcome them because we are diverse, we're inclusive, and we're equitable to the point of suicidal empathy.
If you're running a ministry or you own a business, my guess is that you've been thinking about starting a podcast for a while now, but for various reasons, it hasn't happened yet. Send me an email. I need to personally connect you with Yonder Child Media. They built this studio in 2 days and tackle all of the production. I just come in, start talking, and leave. It's that easy. They do everything else. Whether you want to record at your business or a home office like they just built for me, you come in, start talking, and Yonder Child will do everything else. Send me an email. That's going to be Bryan, Bryan.Dawson, Dawson at 1819news.com, and I'd be happy to personally connect you. My goal in this is opening everyone's eyes to the fact that this, like you said, this is an ideology. It's a religion of conquest, and I would argue all religions have a conquest element to them. I think historic Christianity, through Western colonization, it had a conquest element, but we've lost that with modern dispensationalism. But I'm not going to get into that. And so we're just like, they're just coming over here to have a better life, and it's like, no, this is a concentrated effort in order for them to take what is ours. Like that, that is what they're doing. And the most bizarre thing to me, and I've known it, but I heard the way that you put it when you spoke, is the two-tiered justice system. So talk a little bit about that. Not even the Sharia law difference, but just like, it's kind of like a form of anarcho-tyranny, justice for me, but not for thee, or, I think you know where I'm going with that.
Absolutely. When the Labour government got into power last year, we had a general election at the same time as you guys. They said that the prisons were full. And that's like, okay, wow. So what are they going to do about this? Are they going to build more prisons? Are they going to bring the death penalty back? How are they going to make room for all the criminals? Because crime is rising in our country. And another thing we have to consider, what has changed in the demographics, that particular crimes, especially knife crime and violent crime, is rising, especially in our major cities, which are the most diverse. What are they going to do? They're going to let some criminals out early. Now, we already let them out too early anyway. I think if you serve like half your time on good behavior, you get out. It's a ridiculous system. It's not punitive at all anymore. But they're letting people out even before that time. They're letting out rapists. They're letting out violent, GBH, physical harm abusers. Why? What are they making room for if these are the people they're letting out? Well, the people that they're arresting are the ones that are speaking out against this. The people that are speaking out against two-tiered systems, people speaking out against mass migration. These are the people being arrested. People who post comments on Facebook or on X or retweet something, for goodness. I've got a friend who retweeted something that said, if this is true, ... It doesn't matter what the rest of the stuff she said was, because she was clearly questioning something. She got arrested for it. She had 7 police turn up on her doorstep. She was dragged out of her home to a police cell and told she'd never see her dog again. It's like, this is the kind of behavior we'd expect, how we treat terrorists, right?
Yeah.
And hardened criminals, not mothers, for goodness sake, who've never been in trouble with the law. But why? Why is the state so keen to arrest ordinary working class or middle class, doesn't matter, Brits who raise alarm bells about mass migration or the two-tiered justice system? Well, because it's easier to silence those than it is to address the two-tiered policing system and mass migration. And of course, the biggest problem, well, no, one of the biggest problems, but not the biggest problem facing our country right now, is the fact that, again, looking at the demographic data, 5% of the demographics of our country is made up of Pakistani Mohammedans. We've let in so many that they account for 5%. Now, if we look at other demographic data, especially crime data, we can see that they account for 65% of all child sexual abuse cases. And so we have a clear problem here that they are overrepresented in a massive degree, that we can easily say there's something wrong with the Pakistani Mohammedan men that we're letting into our country, that they're raping our daughters, our nieces, our sisters, our mothers. And what's being done about it? Not a lot. We can see it's happening in Rotherham, Rochdale. We can see it's happening in all coastal regions. We can see it's happening in Telford. We have the data. We can see where it's happening, but they're not getting arrested en masse. Why? Well, because the police force are afraid of being called racist. The local councillors are covering it up because they are made up of elected Pakistani Mohammedans. The parliamentarians are covering it up because they've been complicit in the point of they've been telling the police, don't spark a race riot. And then we've got the Lords. We've got a literal member of the House of Lords who was found guilty of being a member of these Pakistani Mohammedan rape gangs, which the mainstream media calls grooming gangs. And again, they're not just grooming these girls. Of course, they are grooming them, but they're not just grooming them. They're raping them. Like, be honest about what's happening. Stop using the pretty euphemisms to make it sound less bad. This is horrendous. Our girls, white British girls, are being groomed, raped, and sometimes even killed because the system, the establishment, which in that include the mainstream media, the police, the local elected representatives, and the government, are all complicit in covering it up because they're afraid of A, being accused of being racist, or B, they're afraid of the British public being racist. They think we're going to have a massive race war when we find out how bad things really are. And we know how bad things really are, and it's all their fault. It's them who should be afraid. It's the establishment who should be afraid even more than the Pakistani Muslim men who need to be booted out of our country post-haste.
Yeah, that's the one that really got me. And Elon Musk was, when he put a spotlight on it, so I'd been saying it for a long time that it's like the most bizarre thing I've ever seen, where, there would basically be a group of Pakistani Muslims who would club, kidnap, rape a girl, and then if the girl or the girl's parents said something about it, they could go to jail for being Islamophobic, but the ones who did the raping are not at risk, and it's just an unbelievable level of cognitive dissonance and wickedness and everything else. And so we're obviously, and what people would say here is like, well, that's not going to happen here. That's not going to happen here. We joke because, all this woke stuff that's going on, we live in Alabama, and people are like, well, that would never happen here. So we considered putting a section on our website that says when that will never happen here happens here again, because the stuff that was never going to happen keeps on happening. And so, I don't know. The biggest, I guess, point I want to drive home though is it wasn't like this in the United Kingdom and Britain, until it was, and it didn't happen overnight. And it starts in seed form. So talk about like, what would you say to Alabamians who are seeing, there's a Muslim school that they're trying to build. I don't have all the details. We've written on it extensively at 1819, but I can't just recall it off the top of my head. But there's like an Islamic society who's trying to build schools, and that's the same group that's trying to build the school that's trying to make inroads into the Republican Party, and basically cultivate influence inside the power structures of our state. And this should be like, for me, it's like an alarm bell going off. And there's a bunch of people who are flirting with it, or like, well, these aren't those Muslims. What do you have to say about that?
That's a very good point, because people often say, oh, these are the moderate Mohammedans, right? They're not the extremists. It's the Islamist extremists that are the problem. No, it's the Islamic ideology that is the problem. It's inherently evil, and there's no way around that. And it's already happening in America. It's already started. And so it's time to push back hard and firmly, because otherwise it can do exactly what it's doing in the rest of Europe. Look at Paris, look at Brussels, look at Berlin, look at London, look at all the major capital cities all across Western Europe, which used to be referred to as Christendom because it's the foundation of Christian civilization. They're all dark now. They're all full of trash. They're all full of violence. They're all full of wild Mohammedans. And we can look what's happening a state over, for goodness sake. Texas, they're trying to build a Sharia city. They're trying to build their own Mohammedan city in the Free State, for goodness sake. If it can happen there, it can happen anywhere else in this country. And that's why they want to do it, because they're always about signs of dominance. When you see them with their bums in the air on their little rugs in the middle of a street, a middle of a road in London, it's not because there aren't any mosques. There are plenty of blooming mosques, trust me. They're doing it to show that they've conquered the land. When you see their flags everywhere, it's a sign of dominance. Again, they want to show that they own the place. And the response to that is to say no and kick them out. I'm up here in Michigan. Of course, Dearborn has the Mohammedan mayor of Dearborn. And this mayor said recently to a Christian pastor, there's no place for a person like you in our city, and I'll celebrate when you leave. Like, imagine being a guest in someone else's house and saying there's no place for you and I'll celebrate when you leave. Get out, pack your bags, sling your hook, off you go. But Americans have got to be bold enough to say that while they can. Yep. And I don't think everyone's there yet. The Republican Party is still courting them, still hoping to get that diverse vote. No. The Republican Party should go after the American vote, right? The white Anglo-American Christian, first and foremost. Everyone else can come afterwards. You have to have a priority system in a civilization, in a society. And the reason it's dangerous to court the Mohammedans is because that's exactly what we did in Britain. And I'm not criticizing President Trump, because I think he's a great coalition builder, but at the same time, he did court the mayor of Dearborn. I saw him on stage with him shaking his hand saying, thank you for bringing us your vote, when he should have been saying, get on the boat. This is the issue. So please open people's eyes to this.
Yeah, no, that's so good. I was on the Twitter space, X, got to call it X, on there earlier, and I'm sure you saw this too, but Ilhan Omar was campaigning for the guy who's, I think, running to be mayor of Minneapolis, or some powerful position. I don't think it's governor. I think it's governor of Minnesota. I think it's mayor of Minneapolis, I'm pretty sure. And he's the guy, I joked in my last podcast, it's the guy that literally looks like, there was the movie where Tom Hanks was the sea captain, where his boat was taken over by Somali pirates. And there's a famous scene where the Somali pirates are like, you work for me now. That guy is running to be mayor of Minneapolis, and Ilhan Omar was campaigning for him, and they went into this packed out room and they didn't say one word in English. The entire campaign thing for the mayor of flippin' Minneapolis, not a small city.
Yeah, the physiognomy on that guy is off the scale, isn't it?
It's so repulsive and repugnant.
Right, but this is human nature. Like, we're designed. We should trust our instincts. We should trust our conscience. But we're designed in this way to know evil, to recognize it, and to guard against it, to protect ourselves and our loved ones. And when we ignore those God-given gifts, then we get into trouble. Yeah. Like, how many times have we heard from women saying, I had a gut instinct. If I only had trusted my gut instinct, I wouldn't have been, dragged down that alleyway. Then trust your gut instinct. Don't try to be polite, and don't try to be diverse and equitable, and not hold your bag tighter because of the color of the guy. If the guy looks scary to you, then get out of the situation. Yeah. And it's the same with Ilhan Omar and Omar, whatever his name is.
Yeah.
I think his first name is her last name. It's confusing. Yeah. They all have the same names. But these, like, Somalians should not be running for office in America, full stop, right? Mohammedans should not be running for office in America, period. And the fact that they are standing on a platform speaking Somalian and saying we're so proud of our Somalian prime minister or president, whatever it is they have over there, and we're proud Somalians, then go back to Somalia, right, and run for office there. It is insane that this is allowed, and it's not even just allowed; it's encouraged, because aren't we good? Look how good we are at patting their little ethnic minorities on the head. Look, we've got a little pet minority running. No, don't do it. It's disgusting. Stop it.
Oh, I love the way you put things. You have a gift. I guess this is why you are who you are. I think just the bizarreness of the flags that were being flown while the foreign language was being spoken, which is a curse biblically, by the way, and also that you would be ruled over by foreigners is a curse in the Old Testament. It says, if you obey me and you keep covenant with me, there's this long list of blessings. And it says, if you disobey me, there's a long list of curses. We've lost in Christianity the idea of blessings and cursings being in covenant with God. And in the new covenant, it is still the same. There are blessings and cursings inherent with that. And as a nation who is in covenant with God, we have apostatized, and the result of that is that long list of curses. And one of those is that foreigners will rule over you in your land. and that you'll hear foreign tongues speaking. They'll lend to you. They will be superior in business to you in your own land, right? Yeah. It's wild to watch. But the other thing that you said that made a point about them doing their Muslim praying out in the street so that you can see it rather than in a mosque is because this is evidence of the conquest. It's a psychological effort to show you whose land this is. Yeah, it's called England for now. I mean, you already see was it the state flag of Minnesota that looks like the Somalian flag now? I mean, we
used to literally plant flags as a sign of conquest.
Correct.
And they're still doing it.
They're still doing it. And when they fly their flag on your soil, that is no longer immigration. That is now invasion.
And we see, like, Regent Street is one of the main streets in London, and we see the flag on there, or even worse, I mean, more measurable, but we see the LGBT, the trans pride flag up there as well, and they put it all the way down, and it is literally, it is like you see in Nazi Germany, right? It's like, but if it was something they disagreed with, they'd be calling it Nazi Germany. But because it's something they agree with, they're like, no, this is a good thing. It's a sign that something has changed. The regime has changed. There's a new order, and you're absolutely right on the biblical arguments against this stuff. AOC was tweeting today, there are over 100 languages spoken in New York City. Isn't it great that this Mohammedan is being elected? No, it's not great that he's being elected. And it's not great there are 100 languages spoken in the major city, in probably the finance capital of the world. It's bizarre, actually. And it is a biblical curse. And it's like, it's the punishment of the Tower of Babel, actually. And do people even read their Bibles anymore? We should have a nation is a group of people. It's not just a land. It is part of the land, but when you combine the people and the land together, you get a country. But the nation is the people, and the people matter. The people have a shared culture, a shared heritage, a shared ethnicity, and a shared faith. The moment you start to break these things down in the name of diversity, you're no longer a people, therefore you're no longer a nation. And that's what the enemy wants. The enemy wants to divide God's nations and tribes, and he's pretty much having his way in the West.
Yeah. Dive into that a little bit more as far as so I think the intentional effort, you could call it the great replacement theory. You're not supposed to be able to say that there's a great replacement going on. There 100% is a demographic warfare that is the great replacement. That is 100% happening, full stop. Like, people who are like, oh yeah, no, that is 100% happening. Why do they let 30 million illegals in? And they're like, oh, to replace the electorate. No, replacing the electorate is part of it, but it's actually to replace you, your children, your children's future, your God, your culture, your ways, your ethnos, right? All of those things need to be replaced. And if they're going to, my theory, and I want to hear, because you and I didn't talk about this, so this will be the first time I hear you, if you agree with my theory. My theory is that Marxism, because I believe that's what we're up against, is Marxism, communism, Bolshevism, whatever, woke. It's all the same thing, okay? It's all progressivism. It's all that same thing. It's that ideology that started long before that, but where it showed itself in a Christian nation first was in Russia, and you had the Bolshevik Revolution, and Russia was an Orthodox Christian nation. It was a Christian nation with a Christian czar and a Christian people, and it was objectively beautiful with incredible architecture and a wonderful culture. It was an amazing place. And then in 1917, there was the Bolshevik Revolution, where Marxists went and actually slaughtered and killed Tsar Nicholas and his family. Horrible. And then when they took over Russia, it became Soviet Russia, Communist Russia, and they tried to move Soviet, Communist, Marxist, whatever you want to call it. They tried to move it west, and they were unable to do it with tanks, okay? They couldn't win the war moving west, so they had to do it through culture. And so they created cultural subversion. But the whole goal of the cultural subversion, for the communists to be able to dominate, they have to defeat the Christian West, and the only way that they can defeat the Christian West is to break down what you just described. And you do that by replacing it with foreigners, with foreign gods that are different in every way, and you break up that kind of the sameness. You describe it better than I do, but that's it. This is the extension of the Marxist march through the institutions. For them to win, they have to completely deracinate is the term. They have to cut us off from our heritage and our culture, and doing that demographically is a huge piece.
You're absolutely right. And the problem is the Marxists, the Bolsheviks, the communists. The problem is the liberal Jews who reject Christ. It is an anti-Christ movement. and they learned from us. So you're absolutely right when you said earlier that Christians conquered, but conquered in a good way, in that when there were pagan gods, there were false gods being worshipped, sometimes we did smash the idols, and St. Boniface is a prime example of chopping down the idol quite literally. But sometimes we incorporated the celebrations into the true faith and said, well, we can still celebrate on this day, but this is what we'll celebrate. Instead of your idol, we'll celebrate this element of our faith. And so we kind of subsumed cultures into the Christian faith, which is why it's got slightly different flavors all around the world. And they learned from that, and they're subverting our Christian culture and our Christian faith by subsuming things and subverting things. And there is absolutely a great replacement. It is part of a displacement plan that is happening, but it's not just down to them. It's not just being orchestrated. It's also down to us. And this is the major issue that I have, in that, keep Britain as an example, the replacement rate is obviously 2.1, right? And we had forever in Britain, the example set was to be married with 2.4 children, right? So mother and father would replace themselves, and that's a healthy cycle for a society to be in. A good old-fashioned Catholic family would have multiple kids, actually, and that would be even better. But in the Protestantization of Britain, we stuck with 2.4, more middle class, more manageable, whatever. At least we're having enough children to survive. And fast forward to today, whereas I think 2 years ago it was 1.5, a year ago it was 1.4, I believe this year it's 1.2. And so mother and father are no longer replacing themselves. Again, this is a choice. This isn't a replacement. This is a choice to be replaced. At the same time as Generation Z have been aborted. Over a quarter of Generation Z have been aborted. I think it's 28%. And so the previous generations, whether that's millennials or Gen X or baby boomers, whatever, the adults in the room have not been adulting. They've not been procreating. They've not been getting married, having children, and teaching them the faith. They've been, A, not having children, B, not getting married. And when they do get pregnant, they've been killing the babies instead. And so, yes, there is a great replacement going on. There are people being displaced abroad in foreign lands with ideas and values and ideologies counter to our own that are being pushed onto us. But the only reason we're taking them in is because we're not producing ourselves. We're not reproducing. We're not procreating. We're killing ourselves. And so the government, which is liberal and secular and obsessed with GDP, sees numbers and says, okay, those numbers are going down. Where do we get the numbers from? Oh, these people are coming to us. Great. The numbers will go back up, level themselves out. Of course, it doesn't work like that in a utilitarian society, perhaps, but not in a Christian society. And so what we're doing is we're flooding the market with people that hate us and hate our way of life, and their way of life is taking over ours. But it's not just down to the Bolsheviks, the communists, the Marxists. It's not just down to the number machine government officials and civil servants. It's down to us as Christians. Amen. Not doing our jobs.
Yeah, no, 100%. And my eyes were open to all of this, everything, the long march through the institutions that I just unpacked, all through a book from Pat Buchanan called The Death of the West. And he outlines, replacement rates. He outlines migration. He outlines the long march through the institutions. It is an all-out war on the West, and I believe it's an all-out war on the West because West is synonymous with Christendom, right? Before it was called Western civilization, it was called Christendom.
Yes, and that was another subversion. That's what they did. They altered the language.
Yep. And they want to destroy that where Christ, and Christendom literally means where Christ has dominion, and he's ruling and reigning in these nations, and that needed to be destroyed. And they're using all of those means. But I have a friend of mine who has 7 children, as I do, and he said, he wanted to come on and talk about immigration. I probably should have him. We've just never got around to doing it. But he said, the reason that we're having to import all these foreign workers, Hispanics and Haitians, wherever we're bringing them from, the reason we're having to bring them in to do the work is because we didn't have the kids to replace the labor force. And it's like, no one wants to talk about that.
Yeah, it's the greatest sadness. The greatest evil in human history is mass abortion that's happened in the West, in Christendom, since the 1960s and 1970s, when it was decriminalized. This is the darkest age in human history. We are literally killing off an entire generation. And I can't say this often enough, but women have killed through abortion more people than men have ever killed in every war, plague, pestilence, famine, combined in the entirety of documented history. Just let that sink in for a moment. That women are killing more people than we've ever killed before in our entire history. And not only is it accepted, it's approved of. Like, how is this not the darkest time? Forget the Dark Ages, which is when Christianity was actually thriving, which is another subversion of the language. This is the Dark Age. We are in the Dark Age.
Mm. And there's levels, you know, I'm one, and I'm sure you agree with me that there are differences in sin. You know, someone telling a white lie versus someone sodomizing a child. There's differences in sin, right? There's more sin. There's some sins that are more heinous than others. All sin separates us from God and requires Christ's blood to be shed, you know, to bring us back into fellowship with Him. However, there are some sins that are more heinous than others, period. And when you look at the way that God created man and the God created woman, and you broke that down, that women have killed more than any military has if you combine it all. But think about the heinousness of that, though, because the woman, God created the woman to nurture and keep that child alive. That's literally what she was created to do. And instead of doing that, she actually murdered the baby in the place where it should be the safest, in her womb.
Yeah, the serpent is whispering in Eve's ear today.
Yeah.
And, you know, Christ said in John 6, "Take, eat, this is my body." And what do we hear the woman saying? "I'm going to kill this baby because this is my body." It's the subversion again of something that was true, beautiful, and good into something that is sheer evil. And the killing of vulnerable human life, the killing of children, is the gravest evil we can commit. And Christ himself talks about it would be better to be cast into the water with a millstone tied around our neck than to suffer the consequences of what's going to happen to people that harm the innocent children who are barred from coming to him. And that's what we are living through. And the reason, you know, the reason isn't the women. And I'm not here being misogynistic or sexist, although perhaps maybe a little bit. But the point is, it's men who are at fault. Yeah. Adam was at fault for letting Eve eat of the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, for not saying no, for not exemplifying male leadership. And ever since then, we've fallen into the same trap. Why are men allowing their women to kill their own babies? Whether they're legislators who put it into law, or the literal husbands, or well, not even husbands these days, but lovers or whatever, that are the father. And it is not just women killing babies, it's mothers killing babies. And it's not just men allowing them, it's fathers allowing them. And we've got to get back to the truth of the matter. Wow.
Well, there's a huge part of me. I think I'll just have you back on to tell your story at some point in the future. Maybe we'll even get you in studio. But I want to just thank you for what you've stood for, and the fight that you fought, almost like John the Baptist, a voice crying out in the wilderness over in the United Kingdom, calling out the Mohammedans and their conquest, calling out the crazy woke LGBTQ nonsense, and just refusing to relent no matter what it cost you, whether it basically, you know, the things that you've lost from your positions in the church, from your positions in huge media. You know, you had a TV show that you were kicked off of and everything else, and you just continued to stand for the truth no matter what it costs. Telling the truth in a world of lies is dangerous business. You've had tremendous amounts of death threats and all these other things, but you continue to, day after day, speaking truth, and for that, I hold you in the highest regard.
Right, I really do appreciate that. All those worldly things really mean nothing. The things that I've lost the most are dear friends who've been unable to accept me speaking the truth as best I can to my ability. And that's the world we live in today, where just speaking the truth can mean an entire friendship is shattered because people are afraid of hearing it, even if they know it's true. But we must always be on the side of truth. We must always stand firm in the faith. We cannot cower. We cannot throw pearls towards swine. We have to be centered in Christ in all things, and it hurts. Of course it does. You know, losing a TV show and losing a job and losing a friend, of course they hurt, but actually that's nothing. It's minuscule. We're here for a blip. We're here for 80 years, if that. And what comes after that is eternity. And so it's much better to store up treasure in heaven. It's much better to be on the side of Christ. It's much better to hear those words, "Well done, my good and faithful servant," than it is to hear any platitudes from anyone in the here and now. And that's what we must always keep in mind. When we get more afraid of the world, we must remember we must be more afraid of God.
Amen. Father Calvin Robinson, thank you so much for your time.
God bless you.
All right, guys, that'll wrap it up for this episode. Hope you enjoyed it. And as always, put your trust in God and keep your powder dry.